Well, yeah, it's out. You know what? It's hours list is what it is. People don't talk about that enough. I mean, all the great drummers that I know just constantly listen to music. Like there's a guy in LA named Jay Bellerose who's been on a ton of records. Like all that guy does, I swear to you, he sits in his apartment and listens to records all day. Like that, I know that. I've been there. That is what he does. That'll come in handy too, because what you're doing, you know, you need to be a listener, and you also need to listen to the canon of material that you're going to get called to maybe do.
What's up, everybody? Hey, Chrissy, Ellen, Ken. Good to see everybody. Yeah. We are kind of getting settled here. This is actually a first ever. We have 3 different people that are going to be hosting the call, tuning in from 3 different places. 2 of us are on tour, so it's kind of fun. We have none other than Mr. Mark Stepro with us today. I'm really excited. We've had a call with him. If you want to go back and watch that call, it's in the guest artist area. And we had such a good time. I was like, dude, we got to do this again. So Mark, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me aboard. Hey guys, I don't know you, but my name's Mark, and I'm in Washington, DC today on a day off on a tour.
Good. And we'll get to who you're out with and everything. Just so you know who Mark is, he's are you still based in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And he's currently out with the Wallflowers, and he has played with everybody under the sun. You can look up his credentials on that. We'll just go ahead and skip that part of it. But he's played with everybody. He is regularly in Nashville working with Butch. So you're on the Wallflowers tour. We were just talking about it, and then I was like, oh, we got to stop talking. This is actually be way more fun to talk with everybody. So you're on the Wallflowers tour, but then you had to jump off that tour.
Yeah. So other way around. I'm on tour right now with a producer artist named Butch Walker, and I don't know if you guys know him. He's maybe not a super household name as an artist, as a performer, but he's produced a ton of artists that I guarantee you that you've heard of. But he started his career as a solo artist, and it just sort of morphed into production. So he still goes out. In 2019, he produced the latest Wallflowers record, and I played on that. And then I started playing with that group, with the Wallflowers, in addition to Butch. And how did this shake out? It was kind of a strange, weird story, like just as a freelancer. But we had a Wallflowers tour booked, and I said, that's great. And then Butch called and said, yeah, this is just total freelancer life. Butch called and he was like, hey, I was hoping we could do this tour in September. And I said, shoot, I can't, because I'm doing that Wallflowers tour. And he said, okay, all right, shoot. What if I reschedule my tour to do it in October so that then you could do both? And I was like, that sounds great. Fantastic. Told the Wallflowers management, hey, I am good to do this tour. And then I'm going to go out with Butch in October. Okay, no problem. And then all of a sudden, like 3 weeks later, I get the email that the Wallflowers tour has been extended by like 4 weeks. And I can't do it. And I was telling Steven on the phone, like I really loved that band when I was a kid. I'm 41 years old. When I was in high school, like I absolutely adored that band. So like if my 18-year-old self pictures my 41-year-old self calling Jacob Dylan, the Wallflowers guy, and being like, hey, sorry, I can't do your tour, I think my brain would melt. But it's just one of those, kind of first come, first serve thing. Like neither of those groups, there's not like a retainer. I'm not paid like a lawyer or anything like that. I'm paid like a plumber, so it's like I get booked for a period of time. And sort of, it's tricky because you do have to assess like, okay, well, Butch, he really only tours a couple weeks out of the year. He makes his living in Nashville producing records. So on the one hand, there's a lot more to be gained by sticking with the Wallflowers in other words, canceling on Butch, which I did not want to do for a variety of reasons, even though it maybe financially would be in my best interest. And those reasons are, number one, you're only as good as your word. And I told him I would do this. He already moved this tour so that I could do it. So for me to go back to Butch and be like, oh, dude, actually, by the way, turns out that Wallflowers thing got extended. So yeah, I can't even do the thing in October. I would just feel like kind of a jerk. And then on top of that, the most salient factor is the fact that like Butch introduced me to those guys. Like Butch put me on that record. Butch probably told Jacob, hey, you should just hire this guy to be in your band. So it would be a real kind of a jerk move for me to bail on him. But Butch and Jacob are friends in real life, and Jacob totally understood. So we got some subs out to do the Wallflowers tour that's happening right now, that's happening concurrently as I'm doing this thing with Butch Walker. And then I'll resume with Wallflowers as regularly scheduled in December.
Yeah. So, and this is an interesting conversation because whenever I was early on in my career, so it would have been like age 19 or something, I subbed out a symphonic gig that I got hired to play. A buddy of mine, you know, you're in college and outside of college, you get hired to stuff. So I was going a couple cities over. I was going to play with this orchestra for a gig they had. And I had another gig come up that seemed like it was going to be way more fun. It paid more. So I thought, ooh, I could slide down to this gig because I have this sub that is a way better, you know, player. He was a grad student at that time. I said, I can sub this out to him. It'd be no problem. Well, I did sub it out. The guy was not happy about it, but he had that player coming in. But the player was from Brazil, so there was a language barrier, and it turned out it didn't go very well. And the guy never called me again for a gig. So I learned, you know, really early on, it's kind of like you were doing, chase the tail of like, wait, who did I give my word to first? And how do I honor that without burning this bridge over here? You know, that's really important.
It is. And I mean, I think I'm sure there are plenty of contexts where it would totally be chill to sub something out. You know, I don't know, like if it was a party band or a wedding band, cover band, sort of general whatever band, where it's sort of understood that people come and people go and there's 3 or 4 drummers in that chair or whatever. This thing with Butch was definitely not one of those situations. And you kind of learn as you get older to like tell the difference. You know, there are certain things where I would be like, oh, I can probably just sub this out and it'll be fine. And then there are situations where you're like, ooh, I really better not do that. And one litmus that I like to use is like, if I could go to the main guy, essentially who I'm bailing on, and be like, look, man, we have this one-off booked in Florida and I get that, but like, I just got asked to do a 6-week long run. That's like a weekly salary for 6 weeks. It's literally one gig is sort of standing in the way of taking this much, much, much larger chunk of work. Come on, level. What would you do if you were me? And if the main guy is like, yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Then it's kind of like, in other words, it has to be sort of like undeniable. You know, it would be insane to do that because, oh, this other gig pays $200 more. So I'm going to bail on this guy and bum him out. And like you say, go make my $200 extra. But now the guy that I already said yes to hates me. And it's essentially what you would call a penny wise and a pound foolish, you know?
Yeah, no, you said something else interesting that I find myself like multiple times each week. So you said you asked your 18, you know, you thought, what would my 18-year-old self be thinking?
Yeah.
So I always, it's interesting why you refer to it as 18, because I always think of what would my 14-year-old self think, because that was like 14, 15, 16. Those were like really formative years for not just music, but like that's when I met my wife at my first gig. Like it was a big, you know, time. I didn't even know that was happening.
Sure.
So I always ask myself, you know, well, what would my 14-year-old self think of this? And most of the time it's like he would think it was pretty cool, or, you know, what would he do in this situation? So do you think about that pretty often, about, you know, what would your 18-year-old self do?
Well, I wouldn't ask my 18-year-old self what to do in a situation, because my 18-year-old self was totally stupid. You know, you're not even a person, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, your brain is still developing. I guess what I meant by that was just that, like, the idea that, like, I don't think I ever thought I would play in a group like the Wallflowers, right? So like, if I were to try to explain that to my teenage self would find it hard to even believe that in the first place. And then when on top of that, I say, oh, by the way, and I'm going to call Jake and tell him I can't do his tour, my 18-year-old self would not, you know, my young mind would explode. But I don't know, as to the difference between 18 and 14, maybe you at 14 were at the same maturity level as me at 18 or something like that. You were wise beyond your years.
I severely doubt that.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be asking my teenage self for any advice on any matters whatsoever. I'm barely qualified to give advice at 41.
So before we get to, I know we got one submitted question. If you got a question, by the way, feel free to put that in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, that's
Oh yeah,
one of the reasons we have these calls.
I'm going to pull this chat up.
Is so that people can actually talk to the guest artist. And so I know some of you are shy and would like to not do that, but I'd love for you to talk to Mark. He's a great guy, and he doesn't bite. The one thing we have a lot of members lately that have been doing their first gigs, playing for the first time in front of people, and I try to stress that that's a very big learning within itself. So we need to have kind of the playing together, because there's a whole set of other things we're going to learn when we get in front of people, whenever we start playing with other musicians.
Yep.
So what are some things that stick out to you playing live with other musicians? Maybe some tips and pointers that you would give people when they're playing with others. What's some of that?
Okay, sure. There's two that I can think of right off the bat that are, one's musical and one is interpersonal. And those things are the same. And this probably applies whether you're playing in a bar band or at a church or any kind of function. So anyway, let's cover the musical thing first. Obviously you got to be super, 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 super prepared. And I'm going to use terrible, inappropriate mathematical language to articulate this, which is just to say that, like, so how do I explain this? It's like, say you have this material prepared and you're 100% prepared, right? Okay, so you're here. You're going to do the gig and you're going to be nervous, and it's going to sound different than it sounded in your headphones when you were playing along to the record. And somebody's going to turn around and give you a weird look, and you're going to miss a cue, and you're going to be up in your head. And so then you're at 100%. This is what I mean by inappropriate math language. Then you're going to go down here. You're going to lose like 20%. Even if you're like at 100% prepared, you're going to lose 20% in the heat of battle. All this stuff is coming at you. You're freaking out. You're self-conscious, whatever. So you got to be like 120% ready to go, so that when you lose that 20%, you're still at 100%. Does that make any sense? Again, terrible math. That's not how math works. But
it makes perfect sense. And so before you dive into your second thing,
yeah.
When you're prepping for a gig to get 100%, so like the gig I'm doing currently, I spent 2 weeks listening to the music before I ever sat down at the kit.
Okay.
Because I wanted to have it in my ear. I wanted to know the form before I started learning the details of it. When you're prepping for a gig, what's your process for that, so that you can feel like you can go in 100%?
It depends on what the situation is. If it's somebody that calls and says, I need to do this thing tomorrow, I'm just like headphones in, I'm just making charts, and then trying to memorize, and then trying to lose the charts. I tell my son, I have a 7-year-old son he's playing piano right now, and he's like learning his stuff. And it's totally like, I just probably come off like, old man yells at cloud or whatever. But, I tell him, like, what did I say? What was that brilliant thing I said? I said, like, amateurs practice stuff until they get it right, but professionals practice stuff until they can't get it wrong, if that makes any sense. So you just have to have it so together that you could do it with one hand blindfolded on a moment's notice on a house kit that's set up backwards, left-handed, and still do it. Like, you have to be that, you don't have to do anything, but I would want to be that prepared and sort of try to be that prepared. Now, to your point, like, sometimes that's not really an option. Sometimes we're going to do these couple of, these 12, 14 songs next weekend and just make some charts and go. I kind of do what you do, Stephen, though. I just kind of like if I have time, like lead time, like you did with the 2 weeks, I try to use that to my advantage and just allow, through osmosis, I'm cooking dinner, I'm listening to the stuff. I'm driving my kid to school, I'm listening to the stuff. I'm trying to just make it so that, like, if I put on Into the Great Wide Open, the record by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, like, I can play through that record note for note I don't even have to think about it. And I want to get, the idea is to get the material, that whatever I'm assigned to prepare, that inside of myself, inside of my body, and inside of my brain. And, sometimes that's more feasible than others, but that's what I aim for. Just total mastery of the material, basically.
Yeah. And this, I had a situation yesterday that could have gone really, really badly. So we're on this big ranch here in Idaho. It's really beautiful, really beautiful. And we were doing a video filming of songs that I didn't know. So I had to learn them a couple of days before. This is the first time playing them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's cows behind us, there's cameras, it's a band. And then they say, well, let's play this song. What was the song I had learned before the original run of this show, but we haven't played it in 6 or 7 weeks and I haven't listened to it. And they said, oh, we need to do that one. And I'm like, sure. So with cameras rolling, and it's a kind of a funky tune. It's got, you know, a section of 15/8 at the front, which is not as weird as it's not as weird as it.
That sounds incredibly weird.
Yeah.
I can barely count to 15. All right.
and I'm also playing in a stripped down setting with brushes and stuff. Mm-hmm. And the first time I had to play through it with the band was they said, okay, video's rolling, let's go.
Like, but are you trying to match, like you said you're shooting a video, are you trying to match so that your hands on the screen look like the recording?
No.
Oh, okay, because that would be impossible.
No. I would have said no.
Okay, I see.
No, this was a reproduction of that. But to your point, practicing till you can't get it wrong, it was fine. Like, is there something I would have done different? Oh, yeah. I mean, if I could have had a little time, that'd been great.
Sure.
But it was fine. I was, you know, it'll be great. So I like that, man.
It was Donald Rumsfeld who said you go to war with the army that you've got, not the army that you want. You know what I mean? And it's just like, this is what we're doing. You know, like you said, you know, it'd be great to have 3 weeks and leisurely allow this to sort of osmotically kind of wash into my brain or whatever, but that's not happening because this camera's on and we're going to do this now.
Right. Okay.
I get
so
it.
you said you had two things. I love that. Be 120% prepare. What's the second?
The second one is just an interpersonal thing, which is to just, and I see there's a young fella there, little dude in a hat here. So this might not apply to you. Hey man, I was just going to say, like, always go out for drinks after the gig. You know, and by that could mean anything. I don't necessarily mean alcoholic drinks. I just mean the gig's over. Maybe don't pack your stuff up and immediately get in the car and leave, because I am here to tell you that hang after the gig is, I promise you, that is when you will get your next gig. People are hanging out, having a pizza, having some drinks, having some coffee, whatever, talking about the gig, and somebody will go, hey, what are you doing next week? Actually, I just thought about, I'm going to recommend you for a thing. But if you split, it's just this out of sight, out of mind thing. So just, I don't know, always try to stick around and help somebody load out. You know, people appreciate that stuff too, if your stuff's already loaded out. Although you're the drummer, so people should be helping you load out, but that's neither here nor there. But you know what I'm saying? Just be part of the conversation, be part of the situation, be part of the environment, be part of the ecosystem. Make it so, kind of, you know, get in there and make yourself, I don't necessarily mean irreplaceable, but just make it so you're part of the team, you know?
Yeah. The hang it's so huge. Nobody talks about the hang. And that's when people ask me how to get gigs, I'm like, you need to go where the music is. You need to meet them. You need to take them out to lunch. You need to carry their gear. You need to be in their world, you know, you need to, and make yourself like, make yourself not a liability in their world. Make yourself someone they're happy to have around, you know, happy, oh, that guy's here. Let's, you know, Bob's got a question to your point. He said, with your 120% idea, I mean, you could also play the song 20% faster or even 20% slower. Is that kind of what you're saying with be prepared? Have you had situations where you've had to, you know, reinterpret a song and knowing it well enough?
Okay.
You be prepared for that?
I see. Okay. I just want to get the language right of this question. Would your 120% idea mean you could also play the song 20% faster? To be prepared. I don't, hey Bob, if you want to hop in the chat and maybe clarify, I just want to answer that question properly. If you're talking about, like, I can't, maybe it's a joke. If you want to
no problem. What I meant to say, and excuse my language.
No.
When you're making yourself 120% prepared, would you also allow for that, be able to play the song 20% faster or slower to just to make sure you were 120% prepared?
I see what you're saying. Okay. I don't know that I would plan for that specific contingency when I was preparing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that I would game out, oh, let me make sure I can do this 20% faster. Let me make sure I can do this 20% slower. But I've been playing for a long time. And if I really, really know the material, and if it's really, really burned into my brain and into my body, you can ask me to play it 20% faster and I can totally do that. No problem.
Yeah. We had an issue with Bob and Mark. We had something come up yesterday. We were playing, it wasn't a bluegrass tune, but it was a faster train.
Yeah.
And the guitars they're moving quick, man. The lead lines and everything. Well, we also had snow blowing in from the mountains, and we were outside. And as we were going, every take, the guitar's hands were getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
And so we actually wound up about the third take. We were like, hey, let's see if we can make this sit comfortably about 15 or 20 BPM slower. Make it feel like a different vibe, because the guitars was like, I can't play it. My hands are too
sure.
My hands are freezing out.
Yeah.
I was thinking about James Brown and his band, how he would call out a song 60 one night and 120 the next night. And, that kind of preparation, be ready for somebody to do that.
Yeah, I understand your question. I suppose, like I say, I don't know that I would like deliberately practice and prepare for that specific thing to happen. But if I know the material really well, I'll be able to do that. Unless you're talking about some kind of a tempo and or style that like would require, let me think of an example. If I were being asked to play in Bad Religion or The Offspring or some punk band that's super, like I would have to shed that. My hands can move that fast, but my brain, that would take me a minute to like get that together. So I would practice that for sure. But like, with the Wallflowers, with Butch Walker, with Brett Dennen, with Aaron Lee Tashin, I'm basically just learning the material. I'm really, really dialing it into my brain. And if these guys want to play it faster, cool. If they want to play it slower, cool. That's an interesting thing about tempos too, is that in the groups that I play in, the groups that I play in are old man dinosaur gigs. So I'm not hooked up to an SPDS. I'm not hooked up to a click track. Tempos can change and they can move. And I think about this a lot. So in terms of like Western pop music with sort of traditional diatonic 1-4-5 harmony, just, G, D, C, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, you've got the song form, you've got the melody, you've got the harmony, you've got the lyrics, you've got the singing. Those, generally speaking, are the same every night. But the tempo, I don't know, it could move around. So we were in New York the last 2 nights, and we were out late every night, and we were, all of the managers and all the fancy people are there, and, everybody's kind of on edge. We probably played some stuff pretty fast. And then, 2 nights of that, of getting to bed really, really late. And then we drove down to Philly yesterday, and we were very tired, and maybe some of us were a little hungover, and you play it a little slower. That's okay. You know what I mean? Like as long as the band is in agreement, as long as everybody's quarter note is the same, that quarter note can be here or it can be here or whatever, as long as nobody's fighting about, tempo.
Yeah. And we had that happen a few nights ago, where we had rehearsed this song. It was a song that someone had requested. So we were going to play it, and it was a large venue, lots of people, and every night is a different vibe. So we set the click, and the singer started it. And then when I came in, I just seen the click. It worked. Yep. And he's usually 100% on. Like if we set it at a tempo, and I bring that click in, he's always right there. For whatever reason, in between sound check and the gig, the vibe or whatever was happening in the room, he started it slower, and that's where it felt very comfortable. So when I came in, I hit that click, and I immediately bailed on the click, and 2 clicks, I was like, nope, that's not happening.
Yeah, that's not helping us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because it felt good where it was. It's like we can try to adjust, but then everybody's just fighting things. So that's a good point. Now, I think Grant, don't we have a submitted question?
Yeah, we have one submitted question from Sean. Let me pull that up real quick. And this is a question he asked pretty much all our live guest artists. He says, what is your, hold on, here it is. What is your favorite exercise you learned as a beginner that you still do? And maybe what piece of a kit do you still have that has lasted you the longest, or is like a fondest? Okay, so I see what you're saying. You say, like, what is your favorite piece of gear that has some sort of sentimental value? Part 1. And then part 2 is, what is an exercise you learned as a beginner that you still find valuable today?
Okay. And who was that question from?
That was from Sean. He also said he couldn't make it in the call, but he likes to ask that to all our guest artists.
Yeah, he does.
Okay, well, the gear answer is going to be super boring because I'm not really a gear guy. I have a bunch of gear. I don't really care about it. I lived in New York for 5 years, and I never even used my own drums in New York because the little clubs that I played in had house kits, and then the touring kit was in a trailer somewhere. I don't mean to be flip about it. I just mean, I don't. The honest answer to that question is I don't have my childhood Ludwig Acrolite student snare drum. I wish I did. That would be dope. The 90s kind of black graphite looking guy that you can get for $100. You know what I mean? That's actually, speaking of, like, just I have a bunch of old acrylites, and like acrylites are a great deal as far as snares go because they are cheap. They were designed to be student models, but for whatever reason they sound really good. I have one from the 60s, I have one from the 70s, I have a new one, and they're cheapo. And I mean, maybe that's part and parcel with me just not being a huge gear guy. The other thing, it's just like I go into studios all the time and there's gear there, and I used to just watch Sean Pelton, who's the drummer for Saturday Night Live. I used to watch him in a club that is barely the size of my hotel room here in Washington, D.C. And he would literally play Saturday Night Live and then come down at 1 a.m. and do this gig with this guy, Teddy Kumpel. And he would just sit down at the house drum set and start making music. And it sounded like music. And that was kind of a lesson there to me as far as like, it's the carpenter, not the hammer, so to speak. I don't want to be like Mr. Anti-gear guy, but I don't have like a lot of super important, oh man, if I don't have this thing, my night is going to be ruined. But I can answer your question about exercises. And two of them that I do, one that I've been doing for a long time, which I think was his specific question, something that I've been doing for a long time. And that is, I just get the pad. I get the pad out before the gig. Oh, here's a gear recommendation. I have one of those, it's called Reflex is the name of the practice pad. I maybe 2 X's at the end. And I love this practice pad because it's very, very quiet and I can warm up in the green room without driving everybody in the band bonkers. Cause you know how annoying that is when there's like a drummer just going, people are like, dude, please do that somewhere else. But this Reflex pad is very quiet. And what I do, I'll just turn the click on and I just play combinations of rights and lefts and paradiddles. And I just keep an even stream of 16th notes going. But I'm playing paradiddles, I'm playing inverted paradiddles, I'm playing doubles, I'm playing singles. And I'm just trying to get this smooth, almost like sorry, you can't see this, but like a violin, how it's like a long note when it's bowed. I just try to get this kind of smooth sound going, but I'm switching stickings essentially at total random. I'm just making up rights and lefts. So that's one thing that I do. I do that before shows. And then another thing that I do that I've been doing for a long time, this is in the practice room, so I can't really do this at a gig, but I'll put my metronome on and I'll set it very, 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 very slow. So 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. But then I'm going to rearrange in my mind where that downbeat is, and I arrange it so that it hits on the of beat 4. So the last 16th note of the measure. So it's like 1, 2, E, and a 3, E, and a 4, E, and 1, 2, E, and a 3, E, and a 4, E, and so I make it so that the click is the of 4. And what that does is I'm playing 15 16th notes without a click. And then that final one will tell me if I basically have to be a grown-up for the first 15 16th notes. And then it'll tell me if I did well or not, because I'm all for, putting your headphones in and drilling that quarter note click into your brain. And when you're young, you should totally do that. Maybe this is a little bit of an advanced thing, but if you can hear that click on the of 4 and hit it and keep sticking it every time, your time is going to be so solid. I guarantee it.
Yeah. And that's something that my jazz teacher taught me to do. He taught me not that quite extreme. I started by moving it to the upbeat.
Totally. Yeah.
Being on the downbeats,
That's the logical first step. That is the logical first step for sure.
Yeah. and from there moving into those types of exercises.
Yeah, or even just like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and in any sort of non-downbeat quarter note type of thing. And does everybody understand what I mean by sort of just reorienting it in my mind? I'm not physically changing anything on the click. I'm changing the way that I'm hearing where that noise is in a bar, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Okay. So a couple questions. From Helen, and Helen, if you want to unmute and actually talk to Mark, that's great. If not, that's okay too. She said, as drummers, we spend a lot of time focusing on developing our sense of timing and rhythm. How about our sound? Is that something we can work on developing, and how important do you think that is?
That is a great question. I'm reading that right now. Is that something we can work on? Yes, all the time. And how important do you think it is? It's everything. It's very, 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 very important. To illustrate my point, but you got to train your ears. Like, you got to get your ears tuned to like knowing what a good sound is, first of all. So let's start there. So how do we know what a good sound is? Let's listen to drummers who sort of are known to have great sound and burn into our brains what that is. So I would listen to Bernard Purdy. I would listen to Jeff Porcaro. I would listen to Kurt Basquira. I would listen to Steve Ferroni, and whatever, John Bonham, anybody like that. And then, so you're trying to get in your mind what like a good sound is. And it has to do with touch. It has to do with like how you attack the instrument. It has to do with how you approach the instrument. It has to do with how you tune the drums. There's a 5% little bit of voodoo in there that's just, it's just you're bringing, maybe it's more than 5% actually. You are the instrument as the drummer. All right. So and maybe that goes back to my point earlier about not really being super fussy about gear, because it's like the gear isn't the thing that's making the sound. I'm making the sound. Okay. And to reverse engineer this, you can go on YouTube and, not to call anybody out, I can't even think of any names, but like, there are plenty of guys on YouTube trying to show you how to do a thing on drums, but they're executing the idea that they're trying to show you how to do, but it just sounds bad. And you're like, why does this, ask yourself why it sounds bad. You know what I mean? Like, is there sometimes that people, their balance isn't right. It's like all hi-hat, that's a thing. So one very quick hack there is, Matt Johnson told me, always play the thing with the fastest subdivision, the quietest. I think we might have even talked about that at one point. So if it's a 16th note, kind of Jeff Porcaro, 16th note beat, those 16th notes need to sit underneath the kick and the snare. So it's boom, cha, da, da, as opposed to da, ga, 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 ga. You know what I mean? Like, so it's about like getting your balance and your libs right. Super important. And there aren't really any quick exercises as far as how to do that, other than just, you have to listen to a lot of good music, and you have to listen to yourself, and you have to record yourself just with your phone and just listen back. Actually, it's better to do it with your phone, because your phone is totally unforgiving. And you're just like, okay, this is what's going on here. Why does this, would I buy a record if this was the drummer? Would I dance to this? Would this get me moving? If not, why not?
Right. Sorry, I had to mute my audio. So, and we talk actually a good bit about volume control on the kit, and mixing your own sound as you're going. And I refer to the things that happened recently. Yesterday, they didn't have me close mic'd. They were using a couple mics to pick up the ambience of everything. Mm-hmm. And after a couple takes, he said, "Hey, your snare and ride got a little loud on that one with brushes," which I was already playing very softly. But he said it's just kind of overwhelming the acoustic guitar next to you. And so that's a situation where I think sometimes we think we're going to be asked to play all this complicated stuff all the time, or at least that's the way I was made to feel coming up. And so many times it's like, yeah, could you play that same simple thing but not play your kick drum that loud? Yeah. So We talk a lot about that here. Liam actually has his hand up, and he'd love to chat with you. Liam, what's up, man? You'll have to unmute, Liam. We can't unmute you. Let's see. There it is. Now we can hear you.
Hey, sorry if I'm a little loud.
Hey, buddy.
Okay, bud.
So, I was wondering, what songs do you normally use to practice on if you have a practice time routine?
That's a great question. How old are you?
I am 10, turning 11.
I'm doing an inappropriate thing. I'm answering your question with a question. Okay, wow. Where do you live?
I live in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And as well, Mark, Liam is incredibly cool.
I believe it. So are you asking if there's like a specific set of songs that I listen to like now when I play along with stuff, or just what I used to play along to, or?
Yeah, what you listen to now.
Okay. Well, here's one that I've been listening to since I was your age, which is this record by Steely Dan, which I know is a little dorky. It's very dad, but it's this record from 1977 called Asia, and there's some really, it's spelled AJA, and it's got a bunch of like basically all the best drummers from that era on it, because that group they were sort of notorious sticklers for drummers. And there's a song on there that you at age 10, I want you to listen to and play along to. It's called Black Cow, and I think it's Ralph Humphrey as the drummer. I don't know, but it's a super simple beat. Like I haven't even heard you play, but I'm sure you can wrap your brain around it. But that song, Black Cow, is a perfect example of the blend and the balance and the sound and the tone that I was talking about. There's another song on that record called Deacon Blues that I think that's Bernard Purdy playing. Same thing. It's a total pedestrian beat. I could probably show my wife how to do it, and she could physically master the mechanics of it. But it sounds so good, and it's so fun to play along with. I find myself playing along to that record still. If I'm bored in my studio and I'm spinning out and I don't know what to do, I put that record on, Steely Dan Asia. I mentioned it earlier, there's a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers record from the mid-90s called Into the Great Wide Open that has Stan Lynch on drums, and it's a similar thing. It's simple. It's not like you're not going to listen to it and be like, wait, I have no idea what's going on. You're going to listen to it and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do. But what the goal is to try to get your sound to match Stan Lynch's sound in terms of dynamics, sensitivity, touch, tone, control, etc. So get yourself on those records. I would love, as a 41-year-old, I would love to get your perspective as a 10-year-old of listening to that music. And, I wonder if it resonates for you, or if you're like, this is ridiculous or what, but it's very, very good music for a young drummer to start out listening to.
Okay.
Steven, you're muted.
Sorry, there was noise here, so I muted. I do a similar thing, and I held off on Spotify for a long time, Mark, but I actually love Spotify now because of all the playlists I can make, and it's like making mixtapes back in the day. Anyway, I have a playlist that is a ton of tracks, actually some off the album you were just referencing.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Whenever I need to, I just revisit.
Hey, Liam, that's another thing. Yeah, that Steven's idea is great. And I've done that too, where it's just like you randomly come across tunes and you're like, oh, that feels good. That sounds fun. Just pop it in the playlist. And I wonder if, Grant, would you mind, are you able to, can you drop a Spotify link to those two records in the chat?
Yep,
Steely Dan Asia and Into the Great Wide Open, Tom Petty, so that Liam can just go straight to the source?
Yep, we'll do.
Yeah, and everybody will include those links and all the questions. We include jump links to all the questions, everybody, and we'll also include anything that we talk about on this call. Grant is a ninja when it comes to that, so he'll gather up all the links and put them below the video so that you can also reference this stuff later too.
Thanks for doing that, Grant.
No problem.
And Bob has another question in the chat if you want to look at that one, and I'll just read it so that anybody that's watching this later can hear what the question is. But it says, at your level, can you immediately react to the rhythmic and melodic changes? So, for instance, can a drummer react to the harmonic changes? How does that affect what you're doing?
I don't know that I'm Well, no, I take that back. I'm reacting to harmonic changes as much as anybody else in the band. And here's, like, I play guitar, I play piano, not well. Like, I don't, I couldn't be in like Dream Theater or whatever, but like, I definitely play enough guitar that like, there's no song in the Butch Walker set or the Wallflowers set where I'm like, I don't understand what's, like, I could play all those songs on guitar or piano. Like, if I needed to, I could just chord my way through it. And that really, I think that is an invaluable thing to do as a drummer. One of the guys that I used to study with is Glenn Cochee, who plays for the band Wilco. And he used to say, his whole thing was, I don't want you to just be a great drummer. I want you to be a great musician who happens to be on the drums at that particular moment. So and I get it. Like, not everybody's trying to be like a dedicate my entire life to music person. And if you're just playing in your basement, that's totally cool, but it wouldn't kill you to just pick up a $200 acoustic guitar and just start chopping along with songs. Because again, unless you're playing some really dense sort of jazz adjacent, super harmonically complex stuff, your bandmates will just respect you more, and they'll appreciate your input, and they'll appreciate you having a part in the conversation. If you can say, hey, the bridge goes to the 4 chord and then whatever, like just knowing what changes are happening in different sections of the song.
Well, the reason I ask that is because I have years of training, harmonic training, music theory training, and I felt like when I started the drums, I couldn't apply that.
Say a little more about that. What do you mean?
I could apply my knowledge of chord changes and express it through the drums.
Well, you don't necessarily have to express it. You just have to know it. You just have to internalize it. You're not, I'm not marking every chord. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I am aware of them. I'm aware of it. Picture like you're driving down the road and the telephone poles are going by. You know what I mean? Those are bars, and inside of the bars are chords. Like you don't have to articulate it, but I think it's very, very important to just be aware of the changes as they're happening. Cause it sounds like you're in a good spot, Bob, because if you started out with harmonic knowledge, I mean, playing the drums is easy. Like,
I wish you were right.
You've already done the hard part, is my point.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Mark, that was, that's something I've been thinking about lately, because I have harmonic knowledge when it comes to piano as well as like 4-mallet instruments. So
yeah, sure.
Keyboard related instruments.
Yep.
But I've been thinking lately now, especially that I'm back on the road some, I've been thinking about, because there's always guitars around. There's guitars all over. And so I've been thinking, man, I want something more portable that I can just kind of, but it's kind of a new learning experience for me, because, any mallet or keyboard type instrument, I'm pretty comfortable transitioning over to that. But the string thing is going to be a new challenge for me. But I was just thinking about that this past week, having something a little bit more portable that's chordal, that I can.
That's the beauty of guitar players, and like it's always bluegrass musicians, man. They're always just walking around. You know what I mean? Like they just constantly like they're just, because their instrument is this big. You know what I mean? Like if you're a mandolin player, you're just constantly carrying around a mandolin. That's a serious luxury. I mean, there've been times where I've learned sets of music with a guitar, and then just hoped that it would work out on drums. You know what I mean? Just because it's like that's what I had at the time or whatever.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. All right, so whenever you're approaching a new song, let's say you've gone into the studio, somebody sets a new song in front of you, and you creatively need to come up with something for this. Are there any starting points for you? Do you start with sounds? Do you start with the emotion of the tune? Do you start with a groove? We have a lot of people that that's not something as a teacher that I think about often, but it's a huge hurdle. We have all these utensils that we could use now, but now I have a guitar sitting in front of me and I don't have anything. They just want me to put something to this. Where do I start? Where do I hang my hat?
Right.
What's your creative process?
Well, it depends on what the input is from the artist or the producer right out of the gate. Okay. Sometimes there's just like a demo that has a drum machine, like that has programmed drums, and they just want me to play real drums. somewhat in the vein of the way that it was programmed. And that's obviously easy. That's a little bit more just sort of cut and paste. If I was just given an acoustic demo, that happens plenty of times. Somebody's just like, here's this song. And it's just essentially, it's just a little folk ditty, because all that exists are the sort of bare bones of the song, the changes in the melody. Then I would ask myself, what is what I would call like the sort of like the minimum effective beat? What is the most bare bones architectural fundamental in this song? And usually it's somewhere around kick drum on 1, snare drum on 2, your basic Ringo beat or whatever. So if it's, insane example, but if it's like a 4/4, jing 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 jing, I'm not going to play in 6/8 or whatever, and I'm going to listen to the contours of just that rhythm, jing 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 jing, and I can hear there's a backbeat on 2, and then I can just try some stuff on the kick drum and just like kind of maybe if there's a bass player, we work up like a pattern together. Or if there's no bass on the session, I just kind of make one up, and then whoever's adding bass later will sort of be tasked with matching to me. But what I try to do is, and this is the specific answer to your question, is I try to honor that minimum effective beat. This song really, really, really obviously wants "We Will Rock You," Queen, doom doom ga or whatever. But it's like, okay, so let's do that. But then what's like 1 or 2 little tweaks, whether in the drum fills, whether in the sound or the instruments that I select, and the hi-hat. I just want to do 1 or 2 little itty bitty things that if somebody was really paying attention, they would go, oh, that's cool. But it doesn't drastically alter the landscape of the music. It's just like, I'm basically doing what the song is asking me to do, but periodically I'm just kind of piping up with a hot take or an opinion, every once in a while.
All right. I think, there he is.
Go ahead. Sorry. I think David has a question now.
Yeah.
So David, if you want to unmute and talk to Mark.
Okay. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. I'm really good.
All right.
So you strike me as a kind of high energy kind of guy. You're really enthusiastic, and I'm just wondering, are there days when you turn up for work, as you do as a drummer, on those days when you're not so hyped up or looking forward to things, or you've had a difficult night, whatever reasons, and how you deal with that to bring that straight when you get onto stage or when you get into that performance? How do you deal with the mindset where you wake up and you're on the wrong side of the bed, if you like?
What do you do for a job?
Me, I'm an e-learning manager at a university, and it's incredibly interesting, but it's not drumming.
What do you do when you wake up and you just don't want to go to work?
Well, I'll get up and I do my routine, and I eventually go to work, and then I try and link up with people at work who are going to help me kick-start that day. But I also, as a manager, I feel it's my responsibility to lead as I think I would want to be led.
Yeah.
So I try to look past the fact that I've woken up badly that morning, and I try and pick those things up. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah, same. That's what I would advise somebody to do musically. That's what I do. Yeah, because you're right. I am, I'm usually at 11 or whatever, just like, hey, what's going on? But some days I don't feel that way or whatever. And you just got to dig deep and be like, all right, it's not this guy, the guy who's paying me. It's not his problem that I don't feel good or that I'm in a bad mood or that I have something going on at home. Like I gotta, and drums are supposed to be fun. And this is all a joke that we get to do this anyway, because it's so silly and ridiculous. But like at some level, at some point, for me, it's kind of a job, just meaning it's like how it pays my bills or whatever. So I do have to do, what you just discussed when you go to work, which is like, all right, if I had my way, I'd probably stay in bed today, but that is not an option right now. And it happens a lot on tours. Yeah. Once you're like north of 2 and 3 weeks, you're just like, oh God, okay, geez. And you're in a town that you don't want to be in or whatever. And there's no quick, sexy answer to it other than you just have to suck it up and, what do you guys say over there? Keep calm and carry on or whatever, you just.
Yeah, pretty much.
Stiff upper lip, that stuff, and just get in there and
have
get
a
it
cup
done.
Of tea. That's what
right.
we have, a cup of tea. That's what we do, and
that's
and
right.
Everything's fine. That's right.
Got
I've got a second question.
Sure.
Second question for you, Mark, which is, if you could play with anybody right now, if if the ideal phone call was going to come through come to you today, who would you want? Who would you want to be playing with? Who would you love to play with? It doesn't have to be one person here or one band, or it can be as wide as you like.
Yeah, we were just having that discussion on the bus yesterday, and I'll get this out of the way. This is not brown nosy, but like the two guys that I play with, I adore them, and in a lot of ways, I genuinely, no BS. I mean, I do feel like those are kind of in a way dream gigs, and I really, really enjoy playing with them. But I know that that's not what you're asking. So the answer to your question would be Tom Petty, who is no longer with us, Elvis Costello, the jazz guitar player Bill Frisell. Let's see, what would another one be? There's a Graham Parker, who's an English pub rock singer from the 70s. There's a bunch of weird guys that nobody would know, but that, to me, Jay Farrar from Sun Volt. There are a bunch of groups like that. Obviously McCartney, that even talking, that just sounds so ridiculous to be like, yeah, I mean, I play with McCartney, I guess, see if I was busy that week, of course, those are kind of my Elvis or McCartney, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you.
What about you?
Me, my ultimate dream gig would be between either Miles Davis or Sting. That'd be.
Oh, sure.
So I'm thinking I've got time for at least one of those people, because I think the other one might not be available anymore. But
yeah, he's busy.
He's busy. But no, that's the ultimate dream. That would be the ultimate dream gig. Just to amble onto stage and spend a night playing a gig there with anybody like that. Those would be amazing. But like you, I think I love playing with the people I get to play with. Because I don't play as regularly. Obviously, I don't play as regularly as you. I used to play quite regularly, but I think the relationship with the people who you're on the road with, or when you're doing those gigs, is essential. You can't keep it up for long if you're with people who you just can't stand to be around when you're not on stage.
And I don't, I do this for a job, but I have a 7-year-old at home. My wife works. She has a job. I'm not trying to go on tour with people I don't like. I'm just not. I don't like. There's just not. Full disclosure. There's just not really enough money in the touring game where it would be worth making yourself miserable over, if that makes sense. Nobody's doing a tour on drums, coming home and buying a house in cash. You know what I mean? So it's like, then who cares really? Like, let's just find something that we like to do. Funny that you mentioned Sting. I deliberately left that one out only because, like, in my mind, when you talk about those dream gigs, for me, it's important to just draw the distinction between like, this is me being super cocky, but like, I feel like I could play with Elvis, and I feel like I could play with McCartney and not get laughed out of the room if I could control my urge to vomit out of anxiety. I could play that music. But with Sting, like, I don't know, man. That's like, I would be in a mess. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I can. Back to our 100%, 120%. Like, I would be like clawing desperately to like stay above water, and he would probably turn around and say, "You're fired, mate," and that would be it.
Well, I'm certain that I couldn't play along with Sting, and I'm absolutely certain I couldn't play along with Miles. But those would be the dream gigs. But playing with, I don't know, just playing with who you can play with. I've played with a few people, and I really love that. But Sting and there's just so many people. People who were stuck on my bedroom wall when I was growing up, and people who are stuck on my backdrop on the computer now. There's just too many.
It's an incredibly fun thought experiment, and I think it's an important thing to just have in your mind as you go through life. And I'm not a very woo-woo universe blah blah guy, but like, it's just good to be thinking about that stuff, Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right. I think Steven is actually going to the bus right now, so he'll rejoin us as soon as he gets situated there. But in the meantime, you guys are stuck with me. But it looks like Liam's got his hand raised again. So Liam, I'm going to unraise your hand if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was wondering, when was your first gig that you got, or when was the couple first gigs you got?
I probably was a little bit older than you. I was probably 12, and my little silly rock band played in the pet department of a Walmart in my hometown. It was very illustrious. There were a lot of people there shopping at Walmart. I come from Ohio. I grew up just south of you. What city in Michigan are you in?
I'm in Sandusky. It's
Sandusky, Michigan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. There's a Sandusky, Ohio that's up on the lake as well. But anyway, I grew up very close to where you live. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Liam, for that.
Yeah.
All right. So I actually have a couple questions for you, Mark. So kind of where you are now, you're like very well established in the touring world. You have like a whole list of credits, lots of experiences. Is there anything right now, if you could face to face with yourself at the very beginning of your career in music, is there anything that you would like tell yourself now that maybe you would do a little differently, or just like, hey, try this a little better?
Yeah. Okay. Like knowing what I know now.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably a better way to word it. I don't know why.
No, I understand. No, I understand. Let's see. This is going to sound so incredibly arrogant, but I guess I feel like a couple of my intuitions now that I'm older turned out to be correct, which was just that for me. So Liam, like it just, where I grew up, there just weren't a lot of gigs. Like there wasn't much of an opportunity to do it to be as busy as I wanted to be. So I had to kind of move to a bigger city. I went to college in Columbus, Ohio. And then after that, I moved to New York. And then after that, my wife got a job in Los Angeles. So then we moved to Los Angeles. But that was a thing looking back that I'm glad that I did, which is just like, okay, you kind of have to go where the music is and you have to go where the gigs are if you want to do it like this or whatever. And I'm not, I don't know how everybody's different. You know what I mean? Like some people want to play on the weekends and that's fantastic. And you can do that anywhere. A lot of people record from home. You can kind of do that anywhere. I just wanted to be where the party was, if that makes any sense. So I definitely seeked out, bigger cities so that I could challenge myself. Ask me another question. I'm going to think about this because I don't want to sound like I don't have any, I'm sure I screwed so much stuff up and learned from it. I just can't, there's nothing like jumping right into my brain right now, but I assure you something will.
Yeah, no, that's all. I understand. Like, especially like when things have panned out well, you're kind of like, I'm happy with everything. I don't want to change anything. I totally understand.
I'll tell you what. Here's something that I wouldn't have known when I was younger. And again, this is like this is really only applicable if you're full on like trying to do it for a job or whatever. I don't know that I necessarily thought that being a drummer would make you rich, but like. It's very much a middle class situation, unless you're like the guy in the Black Keys or something, and like that's like one guy. It's the days, and I don't mean to be grumpy old guy, but it's just the days of being a studio musician and earning $400,000 a year. I don't think that's really a thing anymore. But that's okay because no one said I was entitled to $400,000 a year in the first place, and it's really really fun. And you just have to like kind of live within your means. And my wife and I we live in California, but, we don't have a very ostentatious lifestyle or expensive tastes or anything like that. And we both love what we do. So maybe I would have just prepared myself for that, to just say like, hey, this is a little bit monastic, it's a little bit like going into the church or something like that. You're not going to be independently wealthy anytime soon, but that's okay because I don't know. I went to Australia 7 times and somebody else paid for it. And that was, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I guess there's different ways to monetize things, I suppose.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally understand that realization. So I have another question. Have you ever had any experiences maybe like on stage or in the studio that were like something bad happened, or it was a negative, like, oh man, I messed this up, or this bad thing happened, that you like really kind of resonated with you and you like drew a valuable lesson from?
No, pretty much every time I play, it's perfect. No, yeah.
You gotta teach me how that works,
dude. I don't see what's so hard about it. Yeah, I've had whatever, any mishap, whether it's gear related, somebody else on stage, me. I've done it all. I've dealt with it all. And you know what? It's kind of easier now that I'm older, because when I was 21, a big catastrophic on stage would have like ruined my night. And, you know, you get older and it's not like I'm jaded or anything, but I care more. I feel like I care more now than ever, but like, you're just sort of like, all right. So it's sort of like, if you've never flown on a plane and there's turbulence, you're going, oh my God. Oh, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at the flight attendants, they're just like, all right, let's maybe get our seatbelts on here. It's going to be a little bumpy. We're going to suspend the beverage tray for a few, and because they've seen that movie, you know what I mean? Like, they're not free. So I've gotten good at recovering from mistakes. But so one time I was playing at Webster Hall in New York City with this guy called Ben Queller, who's a great rock singer. I don't know, 1,200 people. And the bass drum beater went right through the kick drum. And this is a club tour. We don't have like backup kick drums. And, you know, panic. And I just went into like, I don't know if you can see this, but like Mo Tucker from the Velvet Underground was sort of famous for like playing the floor tom as a bass drum. And I just sort of started going, go, go, gaku, go, go, gaku. And the singer's turning around, looking at me, going, what are you doing? And I'm looking at him, I'm going, turn around. Like it's total mayhem. I'm like, don't look at me, you know? And then like in between the song, I just grabbed like a spare head and like duct taped it to the thing really fast. Yeah. And, you know, that got us through the night. So that was one. I don't really know what the lesson there would be, other than be famous enough to always have two bass drums, which is, I have not managed to do that yet. I don't know. Here's a fun one. I was in the studio with Butch Walker making a record for the country singer Keith Urban. We were just doing this track, and I might have even told this story before to Steven, but I had recorded with him, but not a ton. And this fill, I had this idea for this fill in the bridge, and we did a take, and I didn't quite execute it in my mind. And we go back in, and I'm like, oh man, Butch is like, dude, sounds great. You're done. We're moving on, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, no, man, I want to, this fill going into the bridge. I really feel like I can nail it. And he's like, man, you know, we got a lot of stuff to do. I think it's good. I think you're good, man. And we've got 2 previous takes, so I think we're fine. And I just kept pushing like an idiot because I wanted it to be good. You know what I mean? Like it was a genuine, it was a failure to read the room is what it was. And I was like, yeah, but I want to do me, my fill. I want to do my fill. And, you know, Butch wasn't rude, but he was very direct. And he was like, dude, I have like 50 things to worry about right now, including the fact that we're losing Keith in like 10 minutes because he's got to go be on a game show. Like, we don't have time. I'm sorry, but like, I don't care about your fill right now. I told you it was good. Take yes for an answer is the lesson. So if the main guy says it's good, it's probably good, unless you just absolutely cannot live with it.
Is that something you run into like frequently recording with people?
What's that?
Like maybe you're like, man, I'm not 100% happy with that performance, but they're like super stoked on it.
Yeah,
and then you're
all the time. It's poor drummers, man. I'm a pretty meticulous, like type A dude. It bums me out when I think I play not well and somebody's like, yeah, man, but it had like a vibe. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I sucked. You know what I mean? Like, because I didn't really execute it the way that I wanted to execute it. And I get it's fun to have a vibe or whatever, but you have to weigh weigh like, okay, how much do I want to be a stick in the mud about this? And how much do I want to just let it go and move on? And to be fair, in the defense of people who say that to me, sometimes I'll be all fussy, and then we add guitars and we add keys and we add synth and we add percussion and it's mixed. And then I'm like, oh, what was that thing that I was being all whiny about? Oh, it is actually fine or whatever. But that is, to answer your question, like that's a very delicate, and it gets into some interpersonal stuff like, person management and psychology, and again, reading the room. And if it's just me and a producer and I've got all day, I'll be like, dude, let me do that again. And they'll be like, okay, cool. If it's a room full of people and all the people except me think that this is the greatest piece of music that's ever been recorded, you give up, you pick your battles, I suppose.
Yeah. And we were actually having this conversation on a couple community hang calls ago about I can't remember, one of the students here, they were saying that they recorded themselves and they immediately listened back to it, and in the process of playing they felt something that was like, oh, I messed that up, and it kind of got stuck in their head, and they go listen back to it immediately and like, oh, this is terrible, this is the worst thing ever, I'm just going to delete it. And I was kind of like, well, wait a minute, like sometimes you're caught up in the moment of recording and maybe you think you messed something up way, and you like it, you thought it was worse than it actually was.
Oh yeah.
Give it a day or two if you can, and then go back and listen, and then I bet there's a lot of times it's not nearly as bad as you thought it was.
That happens from the amount of time it takes to stand up from the drum set and go into the control room and listen. Sometimes I'll get up after doing a take, and as I'm walking, my internal monologue is, this is a bloodbath. This is a disaster. Why even go in and listen to this? I want to do it again. This is definitely going to suck. And then we listen and I'm like, it's fine. Okay, whatever. Never mind.
Yeah. I was kind of like, I feel like the more you progress in your drumming, the more you're able to kind of like your self-identify quality. And I feel like that window for like performing to like evaluating your performance gets smaller and smaller the better you get. Like you said, like you can tell, like by the time you walk in there and listen, you're able to detach from the performance and just objectively listen to it in the situation, as opposed to like you're just stuck in your head like, oh, that's the worst take ever, I'm just want to delete it, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough gig to like shut that guy up that's constantly assessing as you're performing. You know, you're playing this song, oh, that snare was late, kick was early, fill was a little uneven, blah blah blah, and it's like that's not doing anybody any good. You know what I mean? So the goal is, you know, and I still struggle with it, is to just to get that guy out of the room, out of your head where he currently lives rent free, and just make music.
Yeah, totally. That's I feel like that's one of the bigger obstacles that once I've noticed this with some beginner students, like when they start to getting like, all right, I can play to some songs, and then they get into that mode where they're playing along and then they just can't get out of their own head about everything that's happening. Yeah. Developing that ability to kind of detach emotionally and just play the music and then evaluate.
But that actually gets me thinking. That's interesting because a player's development is 3D, right? It's not linear. It's like, so what I think what happens sometimes, and what you might be describing, this has definitely happened to me, where my ears have been more advanced than my hands. And I'll be playing and I'm like, this does not sound good. I'm not quite there yet. I can tell, but unfortunately I need a little bit more work to physically be able to do this thing that I can tell is not clean and is not even, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so you said that you've kind of like, is there anything that you've done to kind of overcome that? Or is that just kind of like just hours?
Well, it's you know, it's hours listening is what it is.
Okay.
People don't talk about that enough. I mean, all the great drummers are great listeners. It's all the great drummers that I know just constantly listen to music. More than me, and it's a challenge. I'm like, it's an inspiration actually. Like there's a guy in LA named Jay Bellerose who's been on a ton of records. Like all that guy does, I swear to you, he sits in his apartment and listens to records all day. Like that, I know that. I've been there. That is what he does. And like he's 60, I don't know. Like he's an older guy, and he's just constantly listening. So that's how you get that together. That'll come in handy too, because what you're doing, you know, you need to be a listener, and you also need to listen to the canon of material that you're going to get called to maybe do. So Liam, that Steely Dan record, every studio musician knows that record. So there's a song on that record called Home at Last, which you should also listen to, that has Bernard Purdie on it, and it's a halftime shuffle. So I can't tell you how many times like you're on a session and somebody's like, what if we do like kind of like a Home at Last, Bernard Purdie, kind of like a halftime shuffle thing? And if I haven't listened to that record, I go, what does any of that mean that you just said? You know, so the trick is to like amass this library in your mind where if somebody references something, you already know what they're talking about, and you're not like running to your phone to like listen so that you can act like you're on top of it. You know what I mean? And not everybody can know every piece of material, but there are definitely what you would call like tent pole, know all the Ringo stuff. You know what I mean? If somebody says, let's do a beat that's sort of like In My Life. Do you know how to do that? If somebody says, do something that's sort of like Come Together, but not quite as Tom oriented. Okay, like know that. If somebody says, okay, here's an example. Halftime shuffle, but less Bernard Purdy and more Fool in the Rain. Know what that means. Stuff like that. That helps.
Yeah, that's something that Steven talks about all the time is we're drummers, but like we're drummers in the context of music. So we always need to be like pushing back towards the music, and you have to listen to a lot of music to kind of develop that vocabulary of what people are looking for, because most inspiration comes from other sources, like you said, like give me that Bernard Purdy halftime shuffle thing.
Ideally, your hands and your feet are faithful servants of your ears and your heart and your brain. Okay, so that's what you want to have happen. And the thing is, the very unfun, thing that I have to say about this is, it's just not. There's no fast way to do. You can't download all that information into your brain. You have to listen to it all a lot, and in order to do that, you have to love it. And if you're not super into it, you're just not going to do it anyway. It's just it really is this like kind of like lifetime thing. Liam, you're perfectly positioned because you've got another 200 years or so on this planet, so you're good to go, man. You can start downloading all that stuff in your brain. I'm running out of time, but you got time.
That's awesome. That actually leads me to another question. I always like to ask this to people, especially in your case that you're currently on tour. Mm-hmm. How much music do you listen to while you're on tour? Because I know some people, like some guys that I tour with, they listen to music 24/7. They like to stay in that musical headspace. And then other guys, it's like too much for them. And they just like, I just kind of want to chill until like right before the gig and then get in that headspace.
We chill until right before a sound check. So I'm playing with two artists actually on this tour. There's a guitar player, great musician from Nashville named Aaron Lee Tashian, who's an artist in his own right. He's actually one of my best friends. We used to live together in New York. He's opening the show. I'm playing in his band, and then he stays on stage and plays guitar in Butch's band. So it's very like the night just kind of flows. But after we sound check, and then before the gig for about an hour, we all kind of convene in the green room, and Butch has a Bose, like a jam box basically, and people take turns DJing, and it's not a formal thing, it's not a huge deal, but like there's basically music going for the entire hour before the gig, to just get everybody in the headspace of like, this is what we're here to do, we're here to make music. And then afterwards, if we have a couple guests come to the green room and hang out after, that's what we did last night. A couple friends came by in Philly and hung out in the green room. That jam box is still going then. We do a lot of late night if we're driving on the bus overnight, which is common. We'll do like a late night DJ. People will take turns just, wiring into the Bluetooth on the bus, and people just take turns DJing, and we listen to a lot of music that way. But yeah, I start my day in a very pedestrian sort of dad oriented. I read the New York Times, I read the Washington Post, I FaceTime my son, and it's all just, oh crap, I got to do laundry or whatever. And then at sound check is when it's like, okay, we're starting to like ramp into like, we're doing a thing here today. That's why we're here,
Awesome. Yeah. I know some guys are just like, they get overwhelmed with all, like some people are just constantly playing music, and it's like almost overwhelming for them. They're like, they need that separation from like, this is my job, this is like what I do for enjoyment kind of thing. That's interesting.
I think we have in this group, I think we have a pretty healthy balance.
Awesome. So I know you this is a question I just jotted down earlier. I like to ask people who do this at a very high level. You kind of mentioned your warm-up routine earlier. Is there like a specific routine that you have that you do, or is it just kind of like just grab a pad and loosen up with music going?
I just grab a pad with music going. And I mean, you got to understand too, like, especially on tour, this is like, I'm in the corner of a green room that has 8 people in it, and the lady's coming in with a giant bucket of ice, and some security guys coming by and wants to give people wristbands. And like, I'm not like, I don't have a click track going. I'm not like focusing on specific exercises, but that exercise that I talked about earlier is actually perfect for that, because, the singer's over there talking about the set list, the guitar player's talking to his girlfriend, the lady's bringing the ice. I'm just in the corner doing this. I'm just, and I'm just improvising. The jam box is going, so I'm just playing along at some appropriate meter with the music, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just moving my hands, and I do that for 20 minutes or something. And honestly, people it's very sweet. The people that I play with are very complimentary, and I think they think that I'm some kind of an A student or a Cub Scout because they're like, oh man, you're always getting warmed up before the gig. Honestly, it's not for my hands, it's for my brain, it's for my stress, because I have anxiety about, some people aren't nervous, but I'm not one of them. I mean, I want to, okay, let's separate. By nervous, I don't mean like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I'm definitely prepared. I definitely know I can do this. But I'm just anxious. I'm just jumpy. I'm jittery, whatever. I mean, I'm like that right now, and I don't even have a gig today. So the warming up just kind of like focuses. It's like my little version of like meditation, essentially.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I kind of like before the show, I kind of like have like a little routine that I do, and it's more of like just getting my body loose and like getting my headspace in the right space. It's like a nervous energy. It's not like being scared you're not gonna perform.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, there's an important distinction between nervous energy, which hopefully everybody has, and like I'm nervous, meaning I'm not entirely sure that this is gonna work out.
Right. Yeah, that's not a good spot to be.
Yeah.
Ken just threw a question in the chat, and he says, what do you like to do on days when you're on tour but you're not playing? Which I think is like today.
It is today. Well, I call in, I patch into the Stevens drum shed community, check in with everybody, make sure everybody's practicing, tell people to listen to Steely Dan.
Good advice.
Oh man, it depends. That's a great question, and it's at the forefront of my mind because I'm doing it right now. Today we're in DC, and we're like right in the district. We're right by the wharf. So after I pop off with you guys, I'm going to go get lunch, and then I'm going to go walk to the National Mall. I'm going to go see all the stuff I saw when I was on the 7th grade field trip. I'm going to walk down K Street and see all the lobbyists. And I'm interested in politics and national media and stuff. So that's something that I'm going to do today. It's just I'm going to wander around DC. We were in New York City for a couple nights where I used to live. I don't live there currently. So one day I really, really went out and went for a long walk. We were on the Lower East Side. I walked all the way up to Central Park, did all that stuff. Sometimes you're a tourist. But then the next night I was like, I'm tired. I'm just going to stay in my room and eat room service and watch, the Jeffrey Dahmer show on Netflix or whatever, and just try to recharge. So that's something. And I don't feel bad about that. I don't beat myself up. I've been to all these places a bunch of times. But then I also like reach out to friends, because as I was talking earlier about when I was saying, I went to Australia 7 times, and that there are different ways to monetize this career or whatever. One way for me to do that is if I wanted to go see my friend Joe Pug in Baltimore, I would have to book a flight and go fly to see him. But because of this, I'm just going to go call him up and we're going to hang out tomorrow. So I get to see friends from all over the country who I don't normally get to see. So that's another thing that I do on days off. And then that and laundry.
That's awesome. Last time I was in DC, I went to the National Spy Museum, which is pretty awesome. If you haven't gone to that, it's pretty sweet.
I haven't. I'll look at it. It's probably close by. Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks, Ken, for that question. Kim he was just at one of our drum camps, so I see him over there recovering.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I think Steven's in here, but I'm not sure what his reception's like. But I think that's probably all the submitted questions that we have.
Hey, should I be following all the? I haven't really been reading. Are you reading the chat here?
Yeah, I'm keeping up with it. Anything that jumps out that I'll I'm throwing your way. So
I want to make sure I got all this covered in here. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. So if anyone else has any kind of final questions, now's the perfect time to throw them in. We'll kind of start wrapping things up.
What about the lady in the striped shirt, the quiet lady?
Helen.
What do you got, Helen? Anything?
Yeah, sorry. There was a lot of noise in the background before, so I couldn't say hello. But yeah, thanks. That was really helpful. Your answer to my question on sort of developing sound.
Oh, that was you. Okay, good.
Yeah, because that's my sound's pretty awful at the moment. I'm a complete beginner, and it's something that I'm struggling with. So it's just good to hear someone's response about that.
Well, it'd be pretty odd if your sound wasn't awful as a complete beginner. That would be strange if you're like, I just picked these sticks up and I'm just killing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. That doesn't happen often.
Yeah, that's great.
But isn't that a cool thing about music though? It's like, again, I don't mean to be like all Oprah's book club about it, but it's just like, it's a lifelong, I'll be better in 10 years than I am now, you know, like it's a lifelong ramp up.
Yeah, definitely. And I play another instrument where sound is everything, like it's really important. And so I guess I'm thinking a lot about how I approach that instrument compared to the drums. And the drums are very different because they're kind of, you know, it's hard to explain, but they're there and you hit them and they make a noise. Whereas I play, you know, and it's trying to work out, is it the drum making that noise or is it something that I can do to kind of make it sound better? Yep. And so I'm just kind of exploring that whole world at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely you making that noise, but you're totally right. And it's very hard to articulate it. And I think you articulated it about as well as it can be articulated, which is when you listen to a track, even if you're not a musician, you hear the vocal and you hear drums, and then you hear everything else. You know, there's the song, there's the guy singing or the girl singing, and you can not be a musician at all. You can parse out the drums. And then there's just the other stuff. So you're absolutely right that like somebody's sound on the drums is absolute. That's why it's so important, because it's kind of the first thing that people hear, really.
Yeah.
They hear the vocal and they hear the drums. What instrument do you also play? That you said, oh, wow. Well, dude, so that was just like the other guy, I think his name was Bob or something, who was talking about he was trained on a harmonic instrument. Yeah. I would imagine, I don't know anything about French horn, but I've been around horn players and all they worry about is like tone, and getting a really, really good sound. So you're already ahead of the game just in that you even abstractly understand that concept, right?
Yeah, it's so just trying to, trying to get that on the drum. So on the horn, I know what I'm aiming for, and I've spent years trying to get there, and you know, sometimes hours at a time just playing one note until you get kind of glow kind of coming from the way that you put the air down the instrument. And on the drums, I'm thinking there's got to be something that I do that's going to make this sound better, but I'm still kind of trying to work out what that is and how to get there, really. So
sure. It's that's interesting because it's like I think you put it really well. It's like when you're young, starting out, when I don't know how you want to articulate this, when you're beginning your drumming journey, you don't really know what you're aiming for. You know, when I was Liam's age, I was just sort of back there flailing around trying to be in Nirvana, but not really being very good at it. But then you get older and you do it longer, and then you're like, okay, like that's what I was saying about your ears outpacing your hands. You're like, oh, I know what I need to do. I can't quite do it, but I know what I need to do. And then the next several years are just in service of attaining that goal and getting your hands to do what you know, what your ears are telling them to do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. It's been really, really good to talk to you about this. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's a way you kind of imprint yourself on the drums. I remember one time I was playing in Indianapolis, and we got to the show and we were having like a backline drum set there. And the engineer there at the venue, he was like, man, these drums, he just kept talking to me about how awesome these drums sound. And I was like, okay, sweet, let's go. So I set up and we start playing, and he goes, yeah, man, they sound okay. He goes, last night Brian Blade played on this kit and it sounded way better. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's,
of course it
did. Please don't compare me to that, because you're gonna be very disappointed for the rest of the night.
What gig in Indianapolis?
It was at a club, and apparently from what I understand, the backline company that they were going to use for this festival that Brian Blade was playing at messed up. So this club supplied the drum set, and then the next day they brought it back over. And unfortunately, the engineer was comparing me to Brian Blade.
Well, that was that engineer didn't have a lot of what you would call bedside manner. But I mean, it that actually proves that's what the point I've been trying to make the entire time, which is that Brian Blade you could give him a coffee can and he'll make music on it. It's not absolutely. The drums, you know. Yeah. People talk about, every once in a while, you'll hear a story of somebody who got to sit down at Steve Gadd's drum set or sit down at Elvin Jones's drum set. And they're just like, I don't know, I sit down at it and it's just sort of whatever. But then those guys sit down at it and all of a sudden it comes to life, you know?
Yeah, there's a magic that you develop with your sound for sure. Liam's got his hand up again. I'm going to lower your hand, Liam.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you normally like drive everywhere, or do you sometimes fly if you have to like go across the country to gigs?
Well, yeah, I do all sorts. So on this tour that we're on with Butch Walker and the Wallflowers, usually we'll fly somewhere to start. So I live in California. Butch lives in Nashville. So I flew to Nashville. We practiced at his studio for a couple of days, and then we got on a bus, like a tour bus, like you'd see, and we just take that from gig to gig. So we drove the bus up to Minneapolis. We played a gig in Minneapolis. After all the equipment got loaded out, we all got on the bus, and the bus, I don't know if you know anything about this, but it's like the bus has bunks on it that you sleep in. So then we drove overnight, for example, from Minneapolis to Chicago. And so I woke up on the bus outside of the House of Blues in Chicago. We played that gig, drove overnight to Detroit, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of how we're doing that on this tour. There are certain gigs that you'll fly, if there's like what's called a one-off, right? It's just like a festival. I'll fly from LA to Medford, Oregon, and we'll set up, and there'll be a backline company like Grant was talking about, and there'll be like a drum set set up, and I just bring my cymbals, and then I fly home. And then there are local gigs in Los Angeles where I just put my stuff in my car and drive to the place and play the gig. So all kinds.
So do you ever like take your own drum kit somewhere on the plane, or?
Not on a plane. I think that would be impossible. Maybe people used to do that, but like it's, you really can't bring an entire drum kit on an airplane. So that's why there's what's called backline, which is just a company with some guys that just set up some gear, and I have typed up on my computer what's called a rider, RIDER. I'm not sure why it's called that, but it's just my personal preferences of like what kind of a kit I would like to have delivered to the venue. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's absolutely everything I asked for. Sometimes it's a total disaster, and you just have to make it work. And that's where living in New York came in handy, because like I said, I just watched these guys make music on any drum set, and you just sort of have to be prepared for whatever. But I like playing my own kit when I can. This time Butch has a kit at his studio in Nashville. So we were actually just talking about that last night. I'm using his kit on that tour. I have an endorsement with Ludwig. I don't know if you know that drum company. But Butch had this Slingerland drum kit in his studio that he really liked. And he was like, I would really love it if we could use that. Also, because if you follow me on Instagram, you can see the videos. Butch is a maniac and literally like jumps on the bass drum sometimes. So he was like, I think, why don't we take my drums, so that way if I destroy them, I've just destroyed my drums and not your drums. And I was like, good idea, solid plans. So we're using his Slingerland kit on this tour, and he literally, I'm not kidding, like jumps on the kick drum and starts playing along with me. It's pretty ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun.
So what kind of music do you play?
It's rock. It's like a rock band. What does that mean to you, actually? Like if I say that, how does 10-year-old in 2022 picture a rock band? Like, what does that mean to you?
Like a heavy metal, like screaming, like out of your breath, like you cannot like hear them at all.
Yeah, no, it's not. That's adorable. It's not that. I mean, it's not like Cannibal Corpse or whatever, or Slayer. It's really, it's like classic rock. So it's like, I don't know. You're from Michigan. Who's from Michigan? Bob Seger. You ever heard of Bob Seger? Right. Yeah. Okay. It's like that. It's kind of like that. It's like kind of classic rock. Steve Miller Band, Beatles, Eagles, Pink Floyd. Does any of that mean anything to you at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
My dad works for this thing called, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called the Lexington Arts Council. My mom and my dad.
No.
So we have festivals every year, and for the whole summer, we do concerts. So they have their own sound system there, and they tour everywhere and stuff. And every year there's this band that's the Bob Seger tribute band. Okay. That goes there. So
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. What a fortunate position you're in to get to see, people traveling and come into your town and do performances, and to get to see that. Because when I was your age, where I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, I think one of the biggest disadvantages that I had was a total lack of access. meaning there just weren't a lot of bands, people didn't come through there. I had to move to Columbus, Ohio, which at the time, it looks like, maybe there's a couple folks overseas, like Columbus, Ohio is a city of about 500,000 people. But when I was a kid, I would have thought it was like Tokyo or something. It was so exotic, this city in the middle of Ohio. But, so I didn't have access to seeing all the cool music. So that's great that your dad is involved in that. And it sounds like, he probably lets you participate in it, and that's great.
Yeah. I'm actually the drummer in our church band. So.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, that's a great way to log a lot of hours playing the instrument. Even if you didn't live in a big music city, if you're playing drums in your church, that'll get you a lot of mileage on the kit. That's great. Good for you. Yeah.
Sandusky is not a big, compared to Detroit. If you see the city of Detroit and then you see Sandusky, you think, what is what?
Believe me, kid, I could not understand you more. I totally know what you mean. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Liam, for that. But yeah, I'd want to be respectful of your time, Mark. We appreciate you coming out and sharing your day off with us.
Yeah, man, I got to get over that Spy Museum.
Oh yeah, dude, it's awesome. I think it's free too.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. It's good for musicians.
Yeah, I know. Awesome. So thank you guys for joining in. Thank you again, Mark, for hanging out with us and answering a bunch of questions. Our next call is Tuesday. It's a practical applications call. So that should be fun. And Mark, I see Steven over there.
Mark, thanks, man. Sorry, we've been packing up to go. So I've been
all good, buddy. All good.
Not had great reception. Thank you so much for doing this. Man.
Yeah, man. Here, and I'll tell you what, guys. I'm just going to put this here. I'm doing it now. I just put. Oh, maybe it's not going through. I want to just put in the chat my little Instagram-y thing. Let's see. I don't know. Here. I want to send it to the group. Oh, everyone. I'll put my little Instagram thing in here. So that there. So, I'm not a very self-promoting guy, but I am on this tour right now. So we do like posts and stuff from what we're doing on tour. If anybody's interested in seeing what that show looks and sounds like, and then I'll be doing the same thing just with the Wallflowers again in December.
Well, Grant, I'll let you get everybody off the call.
All right. See you, Steven. Mark, again, thank you so much. And everyone go give him a follow. Check out what he's doing. He's probably going to be popping into a city near you soon.
Yep. We haven't quite booked our gig in Sandusky, Michigan yet, but any day now.
The triumphant return.
Thanks, guys.
Right, man. Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll do this again.